You're listening to LeaderTribe, where leaders are made daily, but never in a day. We're talking skills that are relevant, researched, and ready for action. Apply these and you will grow. Here's your daily dose of growth with Dr. Rob McClelland.
Hello, LeaderTribers. How in the world are you? Hey, I've never started off with that kind of long hello, LeaderTribers. So there you go. Dr. Rob in the studio in Atlanta. If you've been listening recently, you understand that I am going through a series that I did with some leaders in Oroville, California. I recorded several of those episodes ahead of time, and now I've returned from that. I'm still continuing to record. And in those other episodes, I said, here's what we're going to do, because of course I'd had it all planned out in advance and my PowerPoint sent it all in. And we did most of that. There's a couple of things that I touched on less than others, or less time than I had originally intended, because of the great questions that were asked and trying to make sure that this was a custom training for the people who were in the room. Anyway, on a 1 to 10, I thought it went like a 12 or a 14. It was so much fun, super, super responsive people. And I am so thankful to have made some new friends in my hometown of Oroville and to provide some really good training for them. Having said that, we're going to continue this week. We're going to actually wrap it up. Remember, the first half of the day, or the first half of my time with them, the first 2 hours, I was just doing it on personal leadership development. You can listen to the last 2 weeks of episodes on that. And then the second 2 hours, the final 2 hours, I was with them learning, talking about team-based leadership, building a great team. How do you have the best team possible? How do you take the team that you have and turn them into champions? We all know that there's some teams out there that work fantastic together and some that don't. By far, the best thing ever done on having healthy organizations, healthy teams, was done by Patrick Lencioni. And that had to do originally with the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and then his follow-up book, The Advantage. If you would like me to send you a executive summary of 5 Dysfunctions of a Team or the book, The Advantage, just hit me up, rob@leadertribe.com. That's rob@leadertribe.com with an email. Say that you listened to the podcast and you'd like an executive summary of those 2 books, and I will get one out to you right away. But here's what we're going to do today, tomorrow, and the rest of this week. I'm just going to get started today with the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, specifically the way I taught it there. This is what Patrick Lencioni is known for, but this week, first time ever, this is in the episodes, just over 400 episodes of the LeaderTribe podcast now. This week, we're starting with episode 401. So 400 episodes in, for the first time ever, this week, I am going to play an interview where I actually interviewed somebody else. Now, this is why this is so crazy, because I had expected this podcast to be an interview podcast where I was interviewing some of the big name, big people leaders out there and playing that for you and then talking about the interviews. But instead, it turned into me just doing teaching and training on different things. And so I don't know where this podcast is going, but I recorded this interview with Patrick Lencioni 2 years ago, and I was doing it right at the very, very beginning when I was planning on having this be an interview podcast. So I thought, I'll get Patrick Lencioni and John Maxwell and a couple other biggies that were out there sort of in that leadership development and team development world. And then I would start playing those interviews. Did not end up going that way for a number of reasons. I certainly could have, but it's turned into more of me doing personal training and doing it more research-based than just interview-based. That changes this week. What? I mean, seriously, come on. Yeah, that's true. Friends, Wednesday and Thursday of this week, I'm going to play that original interview that I had done here in Atlanta with Patrick Lencioni. I got to spend a day with him. He was out here at a John Maxwell event doing some speaking, and I got to be the person to take care of him and hang out with him for a couple of days. And so on one of those days, as our friendship had grown, he did a podcast interview with me. We're going to play that on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. Okay, with all of that introduction, I'm going to spend a few moments here just kind of prefacing the 5 dysfunctions of a team. We'll pick that up tomorrow and then Wednesday and Thursday. Patrick Lencioni, my first ever interview. And so all you people are going to say, that was fantastic. You should do more interviews. And if I hear that over and over again, then I will do it. I have heard it by some people already, but they were just saying, here's ways that you could probably improve your podcast at least once a week. I get emails from people who say, hey, I want to be on the podcast, or my boss would be great to be on the podcast. And it's usually people who just want to sell their wares or talk about a book that they've written to get it out there. And so I've chosen not to do it because I want everything here to be research-based. So friends, are you ready? 5 dysfunctions of a team. There are 5 areas where your team gets upended, loses traction, and where you do not get the best out of people. I'm just going to go over those areas really quickly, and we'll spend the bulk of our time tomorrow when we talk about that, specifically talking about the area of trust. If you've listened to the LeaderTribe podcast or read the blogs, you know trust is a huge area here. I'm one of the people in the world who's done the most work in that area, certainly spoke on it way more than most people at university forums and other things. And so trust is super important, but it's a specific kind of trust. So let's go over these quickly. Tomorrow we will jump right in. Okay, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. These are 5 things that go wrong with a team. Number 1, the base of the big pyramid. And you can go to tablegroup.com, and you get a bunch of free downloads, free PDFs that have this pyramid that I'm talking about. The base of the pyramid, number 1 dysfunction is the absence of trust. I was going to say all of the rest of it doesn't matter. It matters, but if you don't get this one right, you're never going to have the best team. So what do they mean by absence of trust and what we can do about that? We'll talk about that more tomorrow. The next step up on the pyramid, though, is the fear of conflict, the fear of healthy conflict. Hey, I don't want to get into an argument about this. Are you kidding me? If it's an important matter, you should argue about it. But if you don't trust each other, you're not going to have a healthy argument about it. Dysfunction number 3, the lack of commitment. If you haven't been able to duke it out with each other and really find out what each other are thinking and feeling, then you are not going to be totally committed to the solution and to each other. The 4th dysfunction would be the avoidance of accountability. If you don't know exactly what that commitment is from step 3, then there's no way you're going to be held accountable to it in step 4. And then the final dysfunction of the team is inattention to results. If you can't hold each other accountable, there's no way you are going to get the results that you set out to give, unless it's by accident, and that won't happen more than once. Okay, friends, that's it. That's the 5 dysfunctions of a team. We're going to jump in on that tomorrow. Today, just a lot of background, what's going on, and announcing the first ever interview in the history of LeaderTribe. That will be Wednesday and Thursday of this week. Until then, much love. I'm out. Hello, LeaderTribers. Dr. Rob in Atlanta. Hope you're doing fantastic. Life is good. Today we are learning about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. This is something I went over with the leaders in Oroville, California that I was meeting with. Specifically, I have purchased from the Table Group website the videos that go along with this, and I showed about a half-hour video. I think the purchase price on that was $500 or $600. I can't remember. And so this is not something you would do if you just have a business, but it's something as a consultant that I do when I go out and I help businesses work with their teams. Having said that, one of the great opportunities that I have are just explaining the concepts of the 5 dysfunctions of a team. We're going to go into those today on the LeaderTribe podcast. So we briefly covered these yesterday. Today, here's what we're going to do. Dysfunction number 1, the absence of trust. Trust lies at the very heart of any team that's going to function well together. Without a level of trust, and this is not just trust that Patrick Lencioni would call predictive trust, like, hey, I know this guy, I know how he acts, I know he always comes through. You can predict his behavior based on your trust. It's not that at all. It's the kind of trust that he calls vulnerability-based trust. Vulnerability-based trust was hit really hard in Kouzes and Posner's book, The Truth About Leadership. They did an entire chapter on trust and talked a ton about vulnerability-based trust. Vulnerability-based trust says, I am willing to share with you not only who I am, but my failures, my insecurities, not in some weird way, but just saying, hey guys, as we work together on this, the opportunity we have here is incredible, but there's no chance we're going to go all in unless we really can trust each other. And that's scary to me because I've led teams like this in the past that haven't done as well. Now, I've also had some incredible successes as well, but I found out that some of those failures, those were actually my fault. And so I'd like to comment on a couple of, when you do something like that, when you can be that vulnerable, other people will trust you more because they know that you are not trying to hide something. And so if you're going to do that, Patrick Lencioni recommends one of the very first things that you can do is do a personal histories exercise. This is a free download they have again at tablegroup.com, but it's low risk. You're just asking people in your family, where were you in the birth order? Where did you grow up? And then what was one of the challenges you had to overcome as a kid? Just sharing at that level, you're going to learn things about each other and it's going to become more and more normal to be able to share. If you will go back over to LeaderTribe.com, find the search mechanism and put in there vulnerability-based questions. I've done questions. There's free downloads in there of a bunch of personal history, vulnerability-based questions that you can ask. I don't start meetings with teams I lead without some type of question to get us ready to be vulnerable with each other. Dysfunction number 2 is the fear of conflict. I can't jump there too early. Why? Because if you don't have trust, you're always going to have a fear of conflict. If I don't have trust on a team that I'm on, then there's no chance that I'm going to be willing to get in there and argue something out. What I'm going to do, instead of fear of conflict, I'm going to avoid conflict. I'm just going to say, yeah, that sounds great to me. Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. But then when it comes time to actually implementing that and doing all the hard work, I am not going to give it my full level of commitment because I'm not totally dedicated to it. Why not? Because I didn't get to share some of the ways that I thought this might not work or some of the things that we hadn't thought of. It's only when everybody can jump in fully and get over this fear of conflict, but just jump right into the middle of the conflict, be super, super honest with each other. That is where you can overcome that fear of conflict, but you can't do that without trust. But if you can't overcome that type of conflict, there's no chance you can go to the next level, and that has to do with our commitment. Usually when I talk to teams, even in large corporate settings, and I see that this particular team, that they don't follow through on their commitments, I never think, wow, they need to be more committed. I've never thought that. You know what I think? Wow, they don't have good conflict. They don't have healthy, truth-telling type of conflict. And the reason they don't do that is because they don't trust each other. So lack of commitment is never about commitment. It's about the basis or the foundation that was built previous to that. And so lack of commitment comes when you have not had the opportunity to have that trust built up so that you can have good conflict. If I haven't had good conflict, then when I commit to something, it's a very shallow level of commitment. All of a sudden, we're going to go for sort of consensus. Yes, we all agree on this. Great, let's move forward. And we all say that we agree on it, but we're not going to have the hard conversations. When we're challenged on it, we're not going to defend it. We're not going to go back to our teams and say, look, this is how it is, because we've just sort of got consensus, but we haven't done the hard work that is necessary in order to have full-on commitment. Well, when you don't have full-on commitment, you're going to have the next dysfunction of a team, and that is the avoidance of accountability. Here's what happens in that realm. If I am going to hold somebody else accountable, I've got to know exactly what it is that they committed to, what I committed to, and then to be able to say, hey, you know what? We all talked about this. We committed to it, but I don't see this part happening. So what's going on there? Do you need some help? If I'm going to call them on it, if I'm going to hold somebody accountable, it's because I have, in fact, understood exactly what that commitment was. Now you see why commitment is so important, and you don't get a commitment if you don't have healthy conflict and good trust. You can see how these build on each other. So the avoidance of accountability, this is the number one out of all of the dysfunctions, the number one issue that you see in most teams, in most corporate settings for sure. We'll say, hey, here's our goals, here's our standards. We're going to make progress towards these. Did you get your work done? Well, yeah, I had some conversations, but did you do what you said you would do or not? And the answer is they usually don't. Why? Because the commitment wasn't made clear, and so they don't want to be held accountable. They're going to say, well, I don't really understand exactly what we're doing here or what we said we would do, and I know that we wrote this down. They're going to make up excuses. And if you avoid accountability, then the last dysfunction, and this is the last one that I talked about in the group that I was with in Oroville, is inattention to results. If you're not going to be held accountable yourself, and if you're not going to hold your other teammates accountable, there's no chance that you're going to get the results that you could have had and that you should have had and that you said that you wanted. But inattention to results happens when you can't hold each other accountable. And so we're all on a team. Hey, we missed our goals again this year. We missed them last year and the year before that and the year before that. And the reason we keep missing this is because we're not working as a team. We're working as individuals, working together, doing the best we can, but also protecting ourselves and being defensive. Friends, when you get to the place where you don't have to protect yourself, you don't have to be defensive because you trust each other, magic happens. And so that is, in fact, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Again, if you would like an executive book summary on that to go through this yourself, just hit me up with an email, rob@leadertribe.com. That's rob@leadertribe.com, and say, hey, Dr. Rob, how's it going? Listen to the podcast. Please send me the executive summary of either 5 dysfunctions of a team or the book, The Advantage, and I will make sure to get that out to you. Now, that is it for today, but tomorrow, the first ever interview podcast in the history of LeaderTribe, episode number 403, and it's the first time we've done an interview. Who's it going to be with? Patrick Lencioni himself. That interview will be part 1 tomorrow on Wednesday, and then part 2 on Thursday. More about that tomorrow. Until then, much love. I'm out.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the LeaderTribe podcast. For all the free bonuses and growth articles, join the tribe. It's free. Just head on over to LeaderTribe.com to sign up, and we'll see you tomorrow for another daily dose of growth.